What's good, First Church? It's great to be back with you guys. Man, we had a great weekend last weekend visiting the in-laws. Everybody loves that. And I'm glad to be back in church. Hebron, online, Jasper County Jail, and DeMont Wheatfield. This is the day. And I know there's some people, especially men, who've been waiting for this series, brand new teaching series called Job versus Calling. And it's all about finding your calling, turning work into a calling. Next week is going to be a really important week. We're talking about dealing with toxicity in the workplace. I know a lot of us probably deal with that. It's going to be really helpful. I've been waiting to talk about this for a long time. But if you struggle with finding purpose in your job, and you resent maybe your spouse's work, and you think there might be more, I've got great news for you. There is more. Jesus has so much to teach on this topic, and I would call it some of the foundation of the entire Bible. We're going to go back to the roots today and look theologically at why work is not very fun for a lot of us. And if you've ever felt unappreciated, not respected, not loved because of work, maybe your spouse loves their work more than they love you, it feels like, this message is for you. And like I said, there's a two-part series. Next week, we're talking specifically about turning a toxic workplace into a calling. It's going to be really helpful. But this week, foundation, very good. And what we're going to do is we're going to tell a story, we're going to look at some Bible, and then we're going to apply that Bible to three different situations in life. And maybe some of the situations won't hit you specifically, but I know we can contextualize, so it'll be good. And even if you're not a Christian, God's teaching on this is profound. It's rooted in the data. It works. And if you want to have a more satisfying career and marriage, you're going to love this series. And right off the bat, I'm going to make a statement. I think the greatest amount of job dissatisfaction comes from dysfunctional marriage relationships. And single people actually have a bit of advantage when it comes to not hating work. Single people, Paul actually tells us, he wasn't kidding, he tells us that if you really want to serve God, it's a lot easier to do as a single person. Marriage complicates calling. So if you're single, there is still a blessing in this message. There's good stuff that you can contextualize and apply to your life. You can learn about yourself. But I want to talk about how marriage complicates calling today. Marriage complicates calling. 93% of people have been or will be married at some point. If you're not married, you will likely be married. If you're part of the 7% that will never be married, there's still great stuff for you in this message. Like I said, you can contextualize it for your life. But I remember when I first married my sweet wife, Kristen, I was a youth pastor, and I did not really love being a youth pastor. And some people love it. I was good at it, but I didn't love it. I wanted to be a senior pastor. I knew that was a calling for my life. And every day when we first got married, I would leave the woman that I loved, and later the kids that I loved, to do a job that I didn't love. Sometimes I hated it, so I could provide for the family and lead us into the future that I saw for our family. And many days it seemed to me that she would act like I was betraying her for going to work. She would almost like beg me not to go. She would call me multiple times a day at work, text me all the time. And if I didn't answer or I didn't respond, she'd be filled with anger and jealousy and insecurity. Don't you love me? Who are you? And it was really difficult, okay? And I just get a little irritated because I had a job to do. And honestly, so did she for that matter. I was like, where are you finding the time to do this? Like, how can you? It was a complicated situation. I remember sometimes at her worst, she would cry and wail on the phone, saying that I didn't love her. And how come I couldn't respond to a few simple texts during the day, which was frustrating because I was working as hard as I could to love her. And this is how love manifested in her life. I was working hard to provide and all this stuff. And many days I would come home, and she would be angry that I didn't come home earlier. And it's like, what do you want from me? So I'd come home earlier some days, and the way I would do it is I would just put my phone on Do Not Disturb, and I would just ignore it and really focus on getting it done. But then I'd come home, she'd be like, how come you didn't answer my text? I came home earlier, how come? And I was like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. What do you want? And it got to the point where I didn't really want to come home. And it was in this little valley, and by little valley, I mean huge chasm in our marriage. I asked a famous question. I mentioned it before. Some of you know it. But I asked her, I just looked at her and I blurted out, would you want to come home to you? And I remember she was in my face. She was doing what I call the cry yell, where you're yelling and crying at the same time. I don't know if you've ever done that, ladies, to your husband, but she was cry yelling at me. It was very scary. And I was like, are you okay? Clearly not. But I didn't understand. She felt like I didn't understand. She didn't feel like I loved her. It was a big deal. I was like, how can you not understand? But she didn't feel like it. And I didn't come home fast enough for her. And she was mad that I didn't call her on the way home. If I loved her, I would have called her on the way home. And I was like, you don't understand. Like, I just have a few minutes in the car before I come home, and I just kind of need that time and whatever. And anyway, would you want to come home to you? And it was like the hamster that was running in the wheel in her brain got tripped up on the wheel and just started going around and around with the wheel. I mean, she could not compute the question. And I remember being at this place where I didn't really like going to work all that much, but there were days where I enjoyed the job that I hated more than the family that I loved. And that's a sad place to be. I don't know if you've ever been there. I don't know if you can relate to that. I didn't really enjoy my job. My boss, though, was sometimes nicer to me than my wife was. And to be clear, I had a pretty unhealthy and mean boss at the time. But home was unhealthy. Now, I've been in ministry for 20 years this year. And what I've come to realize is that the struggle that my wife and I had is super common. And it's not just men and women like my wife and me with the same personality types that struggle with this. It's many different personality types that struggle with this. It's not related to our personality. It's related to our gender, which is a big deal. I know a lot of you ask, why does it happen? Why do so many marriages, why do so many relationships, why do so many people have resentment towards work in this way? I mean, we can enjoy gardening, but if you landscape for a living, you hate it. And it's like, why? Why do enjoy hobbies, but then when you start doing it for a job, it's terrible? I mean, what is the deal? Why does this happen? And Jesus teaches specifically on this, and it's actually super interesting. This is rooted at the core of the Bible. The Bible tells us precisely why. I believe that God made men and women equal in value, but different in nature. And the Bible was the first and the pioneer in human history of any major society that would treat women as equal in value to men, which is really cool. And the reason women have a voice today, if you're an atheist and you think Christianity is terrible and you're a lady, the reason you have a voice today and you're able to express those opinions today is a matter of historical fact because of the Bible, which is pretty cool. Like, that's a great thing. That's a part of our legacy. You know, the Bible gave women a voice, gave children value. As a matter of historical fact, it ended slavery. As a matter of historical fact, that's all pretty cool. That's all our legacy as Christians. I'm not anti-science, I'm not anti-fact. It's pretty clear that men and women have different natures. Obviously, we have the WNBA and the NBA, because if we didn't and LeBron James played in the WNBA, he'd score 1,000 points a game, right? I mean, there's different natures. It's clear that men and women are different. And the free common law countries that have done the most to allow women to choose their careers freely have the largest gap in gender pay and career choice, because men and women choose different things when given the freedom to choose, because we have different natures. It turns out that the more feminist you become on the spectrum of feminism, the less happy and the less satisfied you become, because we're denying fundamental facts. God is for women, God is for men, but he has a specific design for our lives. And to deny that doesn't lead to healthy places for individuals and for society. It turns out that God's plan for men and for women acknowledges and dignifies and values both men and women beautifully, while allowing both genders to achieve the highest level of human flourishing. So if you value life satisfaction, if you value science, if you value data, and you want men and women to live wonderful, dignified lives, even if you don't believe in Jesus, you want to listen to Jesus' teaching on this issue, because it works, and it leads to a great level of flourishing. Now, God outlines some of the differences between men and women early on. He gives us a calling. He gives us a calling really early on. In fact, in the first chapter of the Bible, in this book called Genesis, the Bible is a collection of books. It's an encyclopedia of books. It's 66 books. The very first one's called Genesis. It's about the beginning. That's what Genesis means, beginning. And he gave man a specific purpose. I want to read it to you right here. Genesis 1:26. It says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let men have dominion. Dominion. And I want to be clear, he's speaking specifically to men because women haven't even been created yet. Women are not in the picture yet. They don't exist yet. It's just men. It's a man. And God gives men the specific calling to take dominion over the earth. Okay, he says, over the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, over the livestock, over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. God doesn't call men to take dominion over women. He calls men to take dominion over the earth. And I believe specifically that God made men to take dominion. This is our calling. Men weren't just made to work. Our natural desire is to have a dominion. That means like a little kingdom, an area that we rule over. In general, men want to build and take dominion over things, okay? That doesn't, there are exceptions to this, but I don't hear that many women saying, you know what I want is a pole barn with spray foam insulation and 10 acres, okay? I don't care about a house, okay? I want to shop, that's what I want. I want to take dominion, I want to control, I want stuff. I want to have stuff, I want side-by-sides, and there are exceptions to this, but in general, it's a man thing. Why? Because we have a nature that wants to take dominion. Right? And that's a part, and again, there are exceptions, but this is, and what's really interesting is this isn't just Western society. This is in general across all human societies, because it turns out that gender is not a social construct. It's an inner nature that was given to us by God, and all the data backs this up. I have one son and 3 daughters. My son is so different. He wants dominion, right? He wants his stuff. He wants his place. He wants to build, create, own. He's different than my daughters. God made females different. It says, then the Lord God said, it's not good that man should be alone. He doesn't say it's not good that women should be alone. Consequently, women have a higher level of life satisfaction than men when they're single, right? It turns out, and this is really interesting, women can be alone, it's just fine. Women in a mediocre marriage are actually happier single. Men in a mediocre marriage are happier married than they would be single. So that's just interesting. The data backs this up. It's not good that man should be alone. We don't take care of ourselves very well, showers and whatnot. I will make a helper who is fit for him. Women were made by God to help in the dominion taking. Now, let me explain what it's not lesser, but as helpers in the dominion taking. Men don't take dominion over women. They partner with each other in the dominion taking. Women make a house a home. What are they doing? They're taking the dominion of the home, the house, and they're making it into a home. They're making it better. They take a people and they make it into a family. God called women to help in the endeavor of dominion taking. And in general, this is very true. There are exceptions to this. There might be men who love to decorate, but in general, I don't hear a lot of men being like, hey, honey, can I just spend a few more hours in the home goods section? You know what I mean? We just got to the live, laugh, love signs, and there's so many different fonts to explore. I'd really love to look at these wall clings, all the sayings we can put on the wall. Can we just, honey, what I want to do is I want to cut out pieces of paper and put them on the wall to see how we could arrange these pictures. I need a few more hours to think and make choices. I need to, honey, can we please look at more carpet swatches? I don't hear a lot of men begging to do that because they take the dominion, and then the women want to make it better. It's a partnership. I don't see a lot of men saying, babe, let's skip the pole barn and tear out these perfectly good floors and put in some other nearly identical floors of a slightly different color. I don't hear a lot of men begging to do that, but I hear women to do that because in general, men take dominion, and what do women want to do? They have an innate desire to help make the dominion better. It's the nature that God made in us, and the partnership can work really well. I mean, the marriage as society is admired, they help each other, right? The men take the dominion, what? Chip makes the dominion. Joanna makes the dominion better. It's the way it works. Helpmate. And I remember when my wife and I were in the depth of the fight, what ended the fight was this note that my wife gave to me right here. You can put up a picture of it. It says, wherever you go, I will go. And whatever you face, I will face. I will honor your goals and dreams and help you to fulfill them. And this was actually a part of our vows, but my wife was essentially ending a fight saying, I want to continue to help you. She's my helpmate. She tells me that all the time. And I'm so thankful that she likes that part of me. When we were dating, she told me that the number one thing she wanted was a godly man, right? And the Bible tells us super clearly, if you're a Christian and you're dating somebody who's not a Christian, that's sinful. That's wrong. We don't do that, right? But the number two thing she wanted was a man that would lead her. She wanted a man that would lead her, would paint the picture, and she would help in the dominion taking. She didn't want a man who was like, I don't know, what do you want to do? That's not what she wanted, right? But this great plan that God made, it got messed up at the fall. When Adam and Eve chose sin, Satan specifically brings a gender-specific curse to men and to women. And this is unique, okay? I want you to see this. This is really cool. Most people don't know this. There's a curse that fell on men. There's a curse that fell on women. I want to look at the curse that fell on men first, okay? Genesis 3:17, it says, and to the man he said, since you listened to your wife and ate from the tree whose fruit I commanded you not to eat, the ground is cursed because of you. All your life will you struggle to scratch a living from it. It will grow thorns and thistles for you, though you will eat of its grains. By the sweat of your brow will you have food to eat until you return to the ground from which you were made. For you were made from the dust, and to the dust you will return. This is so sad. It started off that we were made to work. We had this beautiful call to take dominion, to subdue the land and make it ours. Work was fantastic. Work didn't feel like work. It was fun. But now, because of sin specifically, work will always be work. That's why it's called work. By the sweat of our brow will we have food to eat. You know, when it was a hobby, it was fun, but when it becomes work, all of a sudden the work fights us. And I actually believe that this is why work fights us. By the sweat of our brow will we make 7 trips to the hardware store because it's cursed. By the sweat of our brow will the bolt break off in the engine block, and we'll sit there and spend 2 days trying to extract the one bolt because of the curse. And it seems like it should be fun, right? And men, we have a pre-fall vision for how things are going to go. Oh, babe, the project will just take an hour. When this is done, that'll last forever. Oh, babe, that's not going anywhere, right? Tighten down. That's not going anywhere. But actually, because of the curse, instead of taking 1 hour, it takes 3, right? Instead of lasting forever, it breaks in 3 years. And instead of that's not going anywhere, it blows off the second we get on the freeway. Because of our sin. Because of our sin. And what happened is work is still our calling, but it feels like it's cursed to be hard. It almost feels like, we ever notice that? It's like, why is everything so hard? Because it's cursed. It's because of the fall. It actually is cursed because as a fall. Now, for women, there's a curse as well. And most women know the first part of the curse. It's about childbirth, but everybody doesn't know the second part. And the second part's the most important part, okay? It says, then he said to the woman, will sharpen the pain of your pregnancy, and in pain you'll give birth. And all women, pregnancy is terrible, you know? And I get it. It must be really bad. I've had some terrible Charlie horses. I think I can relate. But women love to talk about this, right? They're like, oh, it's so bad, it's so hard, and whatever else, and things and reasons. And listen, I get it. That's a part of the curse. It's 9 months plus, however long of labor, 48 hours if it's terrible, whatever, right? But the next part of the curse is your whole life. And I want you to see this, ladies, okay? And your desire will be to control your husband, but he will rule over you. And this is such a big deal. Your desire will be to control the dominion. You will want to take dominion. And instead of having this beautiful partnership, the partnership is broken. You will resent his dominion taking, and instead of partnering with him in his endeavor, you will desire to control it. And this is exactly what my wife and I were battling in our household. She wanted to take dominion. I wanted to take dominion. And instead of living out our calling, we both were just doing a job. And God made us for this great purpose. But that calling is reduced to a job in our household. And all of us can feel it. So the big question many of you have, the big question I have, is how do we turn our job into a calling again? And I'm going to answer that question by speaking to 3 groups of people. We're going to speak to women, we're going to speak to a special circumstance, and then I'm going to speak to men. And these are not going to include everything. There are circumstances that are outside of the circumstances I'm talking about, but we're all smart. We can all contextualize. And for women, I actually have a special guest to speak to this part. I've asked my wife to come on down if the price is right. Woo-woo. Hebron, you already know about this lady. She's the Hebron campus director, but this is my wife, Kristen DeMott Wheatfield, and I'm so thankful for her giving this next part. Send it.
Well, thank you, guys. I'm so glad to be here. And Hebron, shout out. I have to say hi to you. And I'm so excited to talk to women about our calling. See, I always wanted to be a mom, but I was raised to think that was a weak calling. I had a corporate job in my early 20s, and on the outside and in my heart, I was a total feminist. I aspired to be a leader in the workplace, and I don't know, any 80s, 90s girls in this room, like all the songs were like, I got my own house, I got my own car. Remember like I-N-D, no, okay. It's all about being that independent woman, and I was on that bandwagon. But I got married, I had kids, and like Pastor John said, I started really resenting his job. I was resenting and resentful in our marriage, and honestly, I resented him. And during the worst part of our marriage, I remember being so mad at him. I felt so tired, so unseen, and I felt like I had absolutely no help at all. And it didn't help the fact that we were financially living on a knife's edge. And I was on him about everything, every day. I felt like if I don't control this man, everything is going to fall apart. Someone has to tell this man to step it up. And it looks like I'm the chief executive officer of that job. Sign me up, right? And see, then he asked me that question. Would you want to come home to you? And I think in that moment, I realized 2 things. 1, absolutely not. Like, I was a monster. Like, he said that. I'm just in the front row nodding like, yeah, that's true, right? But secondarily, I think in that moment, it crystallized for me. We had 2 very different visions for our lives. He wanted to take dominion over his world. He wanted to reach people. He wanted to build a church, buy a ski boat, buy water skis for that ski boat, right? And I wanted to build a family. We had 2 competing visions, and the more I yelled at him to come over to my vision, the more he resisted and wanted to not be there. And see, it was at the depth of that moment that he showed this already, that I made this sign. And that act of faith, like I didn't feel it in the moment. It was an act of faith. It was an obedience to God thing. It changed the trajectory of my life and our marriage and my relationship with God. But I want to take a second to tell you what this doesn't mean, okay? It doesn't mean that I just stood by and let John make foolish, unwise, ungodly choices, or buy a brand new ski boat when we didn't have the money. Do you like my boat? It just comes out sometimes, I'm sorry. Do you know I'm from Minnesota? Okay. I didn't submit to John being ungodly or cruel, but I did submit to his vision for our lives. And more than that, I was committed to help him build it and bring our kids along. That's huge. Like, our family loves being on board with this vision that John made so clear to us. It was a game changer. My heart, though, I'm going to be real. I wanted to control him. I wanted to rule over him. And I still want to rule over and control him. But when I started helping him, I found that I don't just have a job as a wife and a mom. I have a calling that I love. And that's so important to understand, because I want you to get this. Everything in my being screamed, and sometimes still screams at the thought of helping him. I want to rule over and control him. I have fear, shame, control, untrust, right? But guys, I am called by God to help him. It's what I'm made to do. And I have found that I love it. And some of you may be looking at me and be like, oh, that's nice for pastor's wife. You know, like, she's just like a sugar plum fairy, probably goes in the dark. No, I am not. And I am a very feisty woman. I am very sinful. Like, God is not done with me yet. Like, I have a long way to go until I'm sanctified like Christ. Like, it is a choice that I have to fight every single day, not to want to rule and control over my husband. Every day. But I have found when I help him, because he is a godly man and a great leader, he makes space for me to thrive in my giftedness as I help him take dominion. If you have a big personality and the gift of leadership like me, if you're sitting in this room, I want you to know that this doesn't mean that you can't use them. Help him by using these gifts to help move you guys towards your shared vision. Hopefully, with God at the center. Now, I want to make this clear, there's a big difference between submitting and helping. God didn't just make me to submit. He does call me to submit, but guys, that's ground zero. That's permission to play. Yes, submit, but then on building on that submission, we get to help, okay? God made me to help, and I love it. Not always, not every day, not every moment, but it has been such a huge blessing in my life when I am obedient to God in this way. And since then, I have counseled, not exaggerating, hundreds of women to go into and do the same thing. Now, I want to leave you with a question, or questions, ladies. Do you root for your husband to succeed? Do you help him and celebrate him? When was the last time you celebrated and complimented his accomplishments? Do you choose to trust him? Trust is a choice, not a feeling, and godly people extend it before it's earned. Ladies, you have a great calling on your life. We help take dominion. We help by living out our faith and trusting God in this, even when it's scary, even when we don't want to. And when you live out God's plan for your life in this way, watch out, because you will find it brings so much joy and freedom.
And I love what she said about the helping. And I think that for so long what you did was you submitted, but it's when you started helping, right, saying, hey, I want to partner with you in the dominion that we laid out, which, to be clear, I laid out on our first date. It's not like it was a bait and switch.
Right.
That's really what changed things. Yeah. You know, and that was a big deal. And I also wanted to add, because I was thinking about first service, Hebron, we miss this, and I'm glad you're in second service, and we're in second service here. But don't set a trap for your spouse by saying, what did you think of that message? You know what I mean? Like, would you want to come home? What did you think? You know, honestly, be open to this. Be open to God working, like no elbowing, no whatevering. And I'm about to come after men in 2 ways too, so I promise.
Yes.
But thank you, honey. I appreciate
You're
you big time.
welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yep. So I want to have a conversation about families where the woman is a primary breadwinner and men who either stay at home or they're not the primary breadwinner. And I don't think there's a biblical problem with women who work, who are wired to work, and who are earning super well. I think you can do this in a biblical context while a wife is a primary breadwinner in a marriage. We have some really talented, savvy, capable, gifted women at our church. There's nothing wrong with that. I applaud it. But I will say off the bat, I think both the men and the women should be trying equally hard We're both striving as hard as we can, whether we're doing that from home or at work. Obviously, if the mom stays at home and is a deadbeat, or the dad stays at home and is a deadbeat, that's no good. But I have 3 daughters, and if any of them, have a gift of earning, I would be thrilled if they use it. Here's the thing. When the woman is a primary breadwinner, it changes the way that the curse falls, okay? It's just a little bit different. Men, you still have your calling to take dominion, but you'll also struggle with a part of the woman's curse. Obviously not childbirth. I don't believe in birthing persons because I love science and data, right? Women give birth. Men can't. We can't do that, as much as people would like to argue that. But Genesis 3:16, it says, and you will desire to control your husband, but he will rule over you. And men, if you're the stay-at-home and she's a breadwinner, you will also desire to control her. The problem is that you will actually have the strength to control, intimidate, and take charge. If you imagine the way that my wife, when she was unhealthy, was trying to dominate and control me, her nature didn't allow her to actually control and dominate me. And it's not always this way, but sometimes female breadwinner homes can turn super toxic really quick because the men have the greater physical strength. And often I've seen men become super controlling, jealous, insecure, and it plays out in really toxic ways. And instead of taking dominion over the earth like we were called to do, men, we try to take dominion over our wives. And this also happens in relationships where the man is a breadwinner but insecure. It can play out in both ways, but a lot of times when the female's a breadwinner. And here's the thing, as I talk about this, if you're a man and you're doing this, you already know who you are. Like your gut just went, right? Because I'm calling you out, and you can get angry and you can deny, but in your heart, you already know you're doing this. That's right off the bat. Just admit it, okay? We all know. Your wife knows, your family knows, we know. And number 2, I want to ask you to repent for sinning against your wife and sinning against God, for controlling, dominating, and manipulating. God did not make you to take dominion over your wife. He made you to take dominion over the earth. I want you to repent. And then I want you to help her in her calling and find something to take dominion over that's healthy. You were made to do it, which brings me to the final part today. I want to speak to men, all men, including men who are not breadwinners. I think so many of us feel like our job is just a job and not a calling because we have no vision. We don't have a plan to take dominion over anything. We just go to work, we come home and pay the bills, and then we hope we don't get in trouble with our wife. And that is pretty much our whole life. I know a lot of men, that's your big goal. Don't get in trouble at work, don't get in trouble with the bank, and don't get in trouble with wife. That's a good day, but that's also a very uninspiring day, right? You have this great calling to do great things, to take dominion, to subdue, to rule, to conquer. God made you to do it, and instead, all you want to do is not get in trouble. Of course, it feels like Monday you're going back to the rock pile. Of course, it feels unfulfilling. Call your family to be a part of a great adventure. Take the time to discern a great adventure. Your wife was made to help. She will find contentment and joy and satisfaction and calling within that. They want to be led and be a part of a great story. The greatest adventure is building God's kingdom. So show them how a career can be used to build a church, to make a foster home, to do great mission trips, to give radically, to serve God radically. You don't have to be in full-time ministry to be in full-time ministry. Now, I want to be clear. A calling is not a bludgeon we use to command and demand our families. That's what insecure, weak, pathetic men do. Great leaders don't yell, they don't command, they don't demand, they inspire. Ladies, if your husband or man is yelling, commanding, and demanding and being ungodly, you're not biblically supposed to just go with it and submit. That's not right. Men, what we do is we have the courage to discern a calling and inspire our families to walk towards it. Dare to imagine what you can do. And it's got to be, there's really 4 steps to it. Number 1, it's got to be realistic. You can't say, hey, I'm going to go to the moon, right? It's got to be realistic. Number 2, you got to have the courage to build a plan, right? Actually take out steps. Like, here's what we're going to do. Here are the tangible steps we can do. Okay, lay it out. That'll make her much less afraid of it. And number 3, you have to have the discipline to take those steps every single day. I'm going to be disciplined to walk out. And then most importantly, you got to inspire your wife to come with you. This one's tough. You got to paint the picture, man. We're the artists. We paint the picture, and we invite people to be a part of it. And now, if you're dating, and this is so important, if you're dating and you don't like the picture that's being painted, ladies, don't marry him. I've talked a lot about a girl I dated in college for 3.5 years. We liked each other. Falling in love is easy. Staying in love is hard. It was easy to be in love. It was whatever. We were great. We had a degree of compatibility, but we had vastly different views of what we wanted to do with our lives. And breaking up with her was the best thing I ever did. She did not want to be a pastor's wife, right? And I dropped her like 3rd period French. Praise Jesus, okay? Thank God, that would have been a disaster. We would have just been battling our whole lives. Ladies, if you don't like the picture that he's painting, Don't marry him. Please don't. Men, if you love her and she's beautiful and all this stuff, but you have a plan, you have a calling, listen, there's like, I don't know, how many? 4 billion women on earth? Like, choose someone else. There's a lot. In my life, I remember dating my wife, and I'd gotten out of this 3.5-year-long relationship. And every first date I went on, I made it so clear what I wanted to do, right? And I told my wife, on our first date, super, super clear, I want to lead a world-changing church that makes disciples who make disciples. I want a family that follows Jesus, and I want a ski boat. That's what I want. Okay, I told her, you can ask her on our first date, that's what I said. These are the 3 things I want to do. This is what I want to do with our life. We are going to do this. Being married to me, this is what we do. If you don't like boating, we're done, okay? If you don't want to be a pastor's wife, if you don't want to do ministry, if you're not going to let me drag you out and partner with me, we're done. I don't want to get married. I want to do this great. This is what I want. It'd be better to be single than be married to somebody who doesn't want to live out this calling, right? I'm not going to sacrifice my calling for a marriage. About 4 years ago, about 4 years into our marriage, I got sidetracked on taking dominion. You know, it's interesting, I just started drifting, and really the problem was we had 2 separate callings. I mean, Kristen already highlighted it, right? And we just started drifting, and what happened is our life lost its calling, and we were just doing jobs. She was taking care of the kids, I was going to work, and we're just not getting in trouble. That was the big goal. And some of you guys, you know exactly what that feels like. You just wake up every day and you're like a zombie. You don't even think. And you eat, sleep, and repeat, and you look down the road of the rest of your life, and it's kind of bleak because it's like, this is gonna be the rest of my life. And I hate it. That was our life. And that was it, and she was scared. She didn't want to leave her family, and we had a comfortable job, and I was, and fighting and all this stuff. I didn't even realize it, but over time, Kristen and I were drifting apart because we were both walking towards different pictures in life. Both of our callings just became a job. I was cranky, I was mad, I was detached. I was a bad husband too. Kristen, of course, helped me see that I had lost sight of the calling of my life. And that's what she is. She's my helper. She helped me see. And she gave me this picture, this note that she gave to me that I framed represents God resolving the deepest issue we ever faced in our marriage. This was the biggest fight that we ever had. I mean, it was one of those fights. I mean, we fought the fight like 100 times over and over again. And that picture represented God resolving it. I keep it in my office. I just thank God for it all the time, that the Holy Spirit moved in her heart. We had great teaching, great advice, great counseling. But I really believe that God used my wife to save our marriage from the dysfunction that we were in. She encouraged me and she helped me. And I remembered that God had a calling for my life. And we started working together at it. Men, single moms, I dare you today to spend time writing out what you want to do with your life. Spend time actually writing, and I know a lot of you men are like, I don't write. Just grab a pencil or a pen and actually write it out. Dream a little bit. This is what I want. This is what I want. And I know it's kind of scary because so many of us, we gave up our dreams when we were 15. I love that old George Clooney movie. What was that line that he said? How much did they pay you to give up on your dreams? Right? How much did they pay you to give up on I want you to spend time writing, this is what I want to do for God and for his kingdom. This is what I want to show Jesus in heaven for my life. What do you want your family to look like when you're 80? I should probably bump that up because we've got some 80-year-olds here. What do you want your family to look like when you're 95? What's the legacy you want to leave? Spiritually and financially. This is a big question. Some of you guys, as you walk into the sunset of your life and you think about the legacy, you think about the story, you got kids that aren't following Christ and you got kids that are, you got only a few more years to resolve this. Do you want to leave this to, I want you to think, what is the story I want people to tell about me? What is the story I want to tell with my life? What is the story I want to show to Jesus when I get to heaven? I dare you to spend time really actually bringing resolution to a picture. This is so important because so many of us, we just are doing a job. Hey, God gave you a calling to take dominion. So take dominion. Paint the picture of the dominion you want to take and live a life. Don't waste it. And then, this is big. This takes courage. To me, it's like singing karaoke in front of all your closest friends. It's very, very embarrassing, very scary. It's hard. It takes courage to do, but invite your family to come with it, to come into it. And this is so scary. Ladies, you don't have to go on an ungodly adventure. If your husband has this, terrible thing, I want to start a drug empire. No, it's not what we're doing, okay? If he commands and demands, no, tell him in the name of Jesus, stop. That's not it. But men, have the courage to paint a godly picture. And ladies, I want you to know how vulnerable this feels. Like, this is so scary to bear your dreams, and you don't realize it, but for a man, this is the most tender part of his life and of his heart. And if he has the courage to open up his heart and, hey, this is what I dream of doing, don't be like, that is so terrible. What a terrible idea. No. Listen, praise what you can, encourage, and cultivate and help. you'll find you enjoy it. It's what you were made to do. God has a calling on our lives. And I think a marriage that functions this way is beautiful. It's wonderful. And it's a dream to be a part of most of the time. Then God said, let us make man in our own image after our likeness and let him have dominion over the earth. Then the Lord God said, it's not good that man should be alone. I will make a helper who is fit for him. As we close, please stand to your feet. Let me have a prayer. God in heaven, I just thank you for the unique call that you placed on our lives. God, I'm so excited about what you're going to do in our lives and hearts next week. But this week, God, would you help people rediscover the calling that you placed on our lives, Lord? This gift of life is so short. Would you help us live it for your great purposes, building your kingdom? God, I ask that you would help families that are just living life to find a calling again, to find a purpose again, to find dreams again. Dreams that matter both now, but also most importantly in eternity. God, we want to live for you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.